The Old Testament text known as Ecclesiastes very famously says, "To everything there is a season, and a time for every purpose under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to tear down and a time to build, a time to weep and a time to laugh." I intentionally started today's service with some levity with the bit about the disagreement between the Silver Band and the Commissioner of the Salvation Army standing over the opening hymn. But in all seriousness, it took courage for the band members to take that stand, pun intended. For them, at stake in that moment was respect for the music and the musicians, and also the integrity of the worship of God, which matters, and for them outweighed blind adherence to quasi-military liturgical rules. It took courage. And let's be mindful that in the early 1930s, it was not exactly a good time to leave the stability and comfort of the tried and true and start something completely new. It was the Great Depression, after all. Economically, people were suffering. Lack of employment, low wages, fear for the future. After the 30 band members left the Salvation Army, they needed to mortgage their homes to buy the instruments they would need to keep playing the music that they loved for the glory of God. Mortgage their homes to buy instruments. How many of us would do that? And let us also keep in mind the global context of that moment. 1934. The year the Metropolitan Silver Band was formed was also the year that 90% of the population of Germany approved the unification of the positions of chancellorship and presidency, making Adolf Hitler the Führer of the Third Reich, an empire he promised would expand and last for 1,000 years. Economically, politically, and psychologically, this was a moment in history ruled by fear and uncertainty. Using the language of Ecclesiastes, a time when something was being torn down without knowing what would be built in its place. A time when things were being uprooted with no clear vision for what would next be planted. In many ways, it was a time that mirrored the time of the prophet Isaiah, whose book Graham read from earlier. It is telling, I believe, that the prophetic call narrative in Isaiah chapter 6 starts with a death. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting on a throne high and lofty, and the hem of his robe filled the temple. Hanging this prophetic moment on the death of a long-reigning king signals that this was a time of disruption and change in the life of the nation. The chapters immediately preceding and following this week's text give insight into the political power plays taking place at that time, specifically around the Syro-Ephraimitic War, where, to give you a very high-level overview, Isaiah, a high-level counselor in Jerusalem, was desperately trying to get the political and military elite to respond to violent advances from neighboring countries, but instead they chose to rely on the strength of the Assyrian Empire to protect them, an alliance that eventually soured and resulted in the Assyrians invading and destroying much of Judah. The death of the king mirrors the death of the nation. Paralysis in a time of uncertainty and disruption leads to destruction and the suffering of the people. And this deliberate framing emphasizes the critical moment in which Isaiah's encounter with the divine occurs. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting on a throne high and lofty. Seraphs were in attendance above him, and one called to another and said, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory." And I heard a voice from the Lord saying, "Whom shall I send? And who will go for us?" And I said, "Here am I. Send me." Here am I, send me. This weekend 5 years ago, Isaiah's words were told in story and song in the service where I and others were ordained into ministry in the United Church of Canada. It is a great story, and it was a lovely, spirit-filled day. Some of you were there, I remember. And there is a natural inclination to leave the story there with Isaiah's courageous words, "Here am I, send me." We all like stories with happy endings, don't we? Where the hero wins the day and the lovers find each other and Bilbo Baggins lives happily ever after to the end of his days. But that's generally not how life works, is it? There is a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to tear down and a time to build. Life keeps rolling after life keeps moving after the credits roll. And if you were to keep the camera on Isaiah after his dramatic "Here am I, send me" moment, we would see him confronted with the hard implications of prophetic ministry. Isaiah encounters the glory of God and receives a commission to speak on behalf of God. But his commission is to speak to a people who will hear but never understand, who will see but will not perceive. And when Isaiah asks, "How long, Lord? How long will it be like this?" the answer comes, "Until cities lie waste without inhabitants, and houses without people, and the land is utterly desolate." The death of the king mirrors the death of the nation. Paralysis in a time of uncertainty and disruption leads to destruction and the suffering of the people. And this deliberate framing emphasizes the critical moment in which Isaiah's encounter with the divine occurs, because embedded within his story is also the pathway through uncertainty, through disruption, through suffering. "Woe is me, I am lost," Isaiah says, "for I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips. Yet my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts." Then one of the seraphs flew to me, holding a live coal, and the seraph touched my mouth with it and said, "Now that this has touched your lips, your guilt has departed and your sin is blotted out." Isaiah's story teaches us that our worship of God matters. There is no way to authentically encounter God without being radically changed by God. And this transformation through encounter naturally leads to service of some kind, to work and witness in God's name. A mature understanding of ministry in all its many forms for all of us, lay and ordered, means understanding that truly prophetic ministry will not be easy. It will come with trials and failures. It will mean encountering apathy and opposition and being in proximity to people who will hear but never understand, will see but do not perceive. And if we get stuck in our own ways, those never understanding, not perceiving people could very well become us. And so when we feel the inclination to simply protect what feels comfortable, to not rock the boat, to simply stand when we are told, Isaiah's story reminds us that paralysis is the path to destruction, and the only way through our times of fear and trembling is to keep moving, to keep growing. The only way through is through transformation, and it starts by confessing when we are wrong, when we have been those people of unclean lips and hearts and hands, and to move forward with humility and integrity, and to have the courage when those holy moments of hard choice come for us, and they do come for all of us, when the divine presence either thunders or whispers to us, "Whom shall I send? Who will go for us?" That we may have the clear-eyed courage to answer, "Here am I, send me. Here am I, send me." The prophet Isaiah had such a profound impact on the life of the nation that generations later, as was the custom in the ancient world, others would continue to write in his name and with his mission. And in perhaps the darkest moment in the life of the nation, the Babylonian exile, where cities were destroyed, people carted off, and sacred customs and traditions laid waste, there came a new prophetic promise. In Isaiah chapter 43, God says that the time of destruction is at an end. See, God says, I am doing a new thing. I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland. The mighty Assyrian empire, which instilled so much fear and trembling, did not rule forever. The Babylonian Empire fell. So did the Roman Empire. The Third Reich brought 12 of the darkest and most tragic years in human history, but it was 12, not the 1,000 years envisioned by Hitler. Empires rise and empires fall. To everything there is a season, a time for every purpose under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die. Empires rise and fall. Earthly kingdoms crumble. But as Christians, we are to follow the King who defies death. As a people of faith, we are called to hold hope in God's reign, which does not end, and keep faith in the promise that even in the midst of uncertainty and fear, God is always doing a new thing, always moving towards goodness, always creating something beautiful, always making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland. Victor Hugo once said that nothing is more powerful than an idea whose time has come. Nothing is more powerful than an idea whose time has come. And in 1934, in a time of economic, political, and social disruption, the Metropolitan Silver Band was an idea whose time had come. It was a new thing that God had called forth, and the people responded with courage and with faith. And the journey from that point has not been easy or straightforward. But 90 years later, there lives a legacy of music making to the glory of God that we all now draw upon and benefit from, and it is good and it is right to celebrate this. There is a temptation to think that the time of prophets and prophecy only refers to biblical times, but that is far from the truth. All of human history is a call and a response. God calls forth and the people respond, and there is nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come. In 1934, as the Silver Band was taking shape here in Toronto, in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, after years of being denied, with deep faith and courage, Reverend Linda Grucci broke through the gender barrier and became the first woman ordained in the United Church of Canada. It was a prophetic moment that we all now draw upon and benefit from. And even though the journey of equality has not been easy or straightforward, there is nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come. In 1988, after years of courageous personal witness and a debate that threatened to split the church, commissioners of the 32nd General Council voted 3-1 to remove barriers for gay and lesbian people to become members and ministers of the United Church of Canada. It was a prophetic moment that we all now draw upon and benefit from, and even though the journey towards full LGBTQ inclusion has not been easy or straightforward, there is nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come. I believe that the next prophetic moment is actually a series of moments over many years as our church journeys towards reconciliation with our Indigenous siblings. The formal apologies of 1986 and 1998 were part of that journey, as was setting up the Healing Fund to support survivors of the residential school system, as was the recent vote to form an autonomous Indigenous organization within the United Church, as are our own recent efforts here at Metropolitan through the building of the relationship with the official estate of Norval Morrisseau and the placing of his art, rich in Indigenous story and cosmology, in respectful dialogue with our own sacred art and story. Even though the journey of reconciliation will not be easy or straightforward, I believe that these are holy moments that we, the next generation and the seventh generation down the line, will draw upon and benefit from, because nothing Nothing is more powerful than an idea whose time has come. Empires rise and fall. Earthly kingdoms crumble. To everything there is a season and a time for every purpose under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die. But as Christians, we follow the King who defies death in all its faces and hold hope in the reign of God which does not end. Even in times of disruption and fear, we are called to keep faith that God is always doing a new thing, always moving towards goodness, always creating something beautiful, always making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wastelands. Even here, even now, God is calling forth prophets. Whom shall I send? Who will go for us? Even here, even now, in our holy moments of hard choice, will we have the courage to answer? Will we have the courage to respond? Here am I. Send me.